Must have energy, must have courage. Thanks to Sean and Kat and Nexus Digital for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I've deliberately avoided this kind of thing for many years because I don't like taking up space, and I am a middle-aged white man. When I got to Manchester, I took a cab to the hotel, and the cab driver told me I looked just like Bill Gates, which I really didn't appreciate. Another reason for not doing that much speaking is it takes me a long time to come up with interesting things to say. I joined Citizens of Ice in late 2019. I'm going to tell the story of work since then as best I can, but that's quite a lot of work, and I might be doing a disservice to both the data and the AI, but bear with me. So this is a very instructive to me slide. I'm going to tell you about me. I'm going to tell you about Citizens of Ice. I'm going to tell you about data at Citizens of Ice. There's an interlude. Don't worry, I won't be singing. I'm going to tell you about AI at Citizens of Ice. So, change takes time. I believe this to be true. I had a postcard from Ali Fielding from the Practical Action series, and I had it in front of my desk working, and this really resonates with me. And me, I'm not that interesting. Oh, that's it. Takes me a long time to get really good at a job. If you are thinking of offering me a job, please ignore this slide, yeah? I'm not currently looking for work, but it's always nice to be asked. Sorry, let me go back one. So, long time to get good at a job. I like to be steady. I like to keep moving, but not rushing. And sometimes that can get on people's nerves. But that's the way I am, and that's the way I approach my work. I believe that understanding context is a superpower. It helps you to make decisions with confidence, and it helps you to know when a question can't be answered. And in the data space, knowing when a question can't be answered is particularly valuable. That context can take a long time to understand. Sometimes there isn't a one-page summary or an elevator pitch, and you have to do the work to really understand that. And when I joined Citizens of Ice, I admit, I came in with some preconceptions and I didn't do the work. I thought this is going to be like organizations I've seen before, and that really wasn't the case. So, tell you about Citizens of Ice. Citizens of Ice is a charity, not everybody knows that. It's a national organization and a network of over 230 independent local Citizens of Ice across England and Wales. Okay, here's a map. So, this is all of the Citizens of Ice, independent Citizens of Ice across England and Wales. You see I've managed to get Northumberland up in the north, but sacrificed a little bit of Cornwall down in the southwest, but we're not missing any Citizens of Ice in Cornwall there. So the organization was established in 1939. We help millions of people every year with their advice needs. Debt, benefits, housing, employment, consumer issues, those are the main ones, but beyond as well. So what to do if you want to complain about a noisy neighbor, for example. Demand for our service is very high, and I expect everybody in the room can understand why, because it's about conditions in society. Also, supply of advice has been the highest ever over the last 3 years, and this is in person, over the telephone, over web chat, and all of our advice content is available on our website, which is a high traffic website, very well used. You could go into, I don't know, what is demand, how much potential demand is there. These are examples of questions I feel are not necessarily the most valuable ones to answer. I can tell you if you go and speak to a local Citizens of Ice, they will tell you that they have more advice demand than they can meet, and that's evidence enough for me. And speaking of evidence, our evidence base is very strong, and this is gathered by by advisors through our primarily through our in-house case management tool, Casebook, gathered through the provision of advice at a large scale. And one of the things that gives this, for example, by tagging advice topics, is a large amount of insight to inform our policy influencing positions with neutrality. And having that strong evidence base and also being politically neutral is important, and that's a little bit of foreshadowing for a bit in the middle. Secrets. Our public-facing data work is amazing. Many of you might have seen this from our policy and advocacy colleagues, and if you haven't seen it, I thoroughly recommend that you check it out. But I'm not going to talk about it today, because it already has a prominent platform, and it's not really mine to represent. But I would say, in my time at Citizens Advice, this work has just got better and better and better. And it's not about the data. You might think that Citizens Advice data is somehow in and of itself amazing and has some universal utility, and it's not true. It is about the people that work with the data. That's what makes the work so good. Now, I spoke about why this organization is complex. I want to play out what I think are the main ones, and understanding these, how that helps me to know what decisions to make. Sorry. Okay. First, there's the nature of advice itself, which sounds really pretentious. But what it means is advice is not a transactional service. It's not selling something to somebody. You are advising them, and they can choose to act on that or not. And that means it can be challenging, particularly when you want to measure outcomes. Then there's the sheer breadth of advice, so advising on pretty much anything with a legal basis across England and Wales. There's a huge variety of advice needs, from relatively shallow information through to people experiencing multiple issues at once who require complex casework. We've got geography and demographics, simply kind of rural, urban, but all of the demographics across the UK, and you can think, for example, particular points in people's lives, they're going to require some advice. The way different demographics experience different conditions in society due to systemic factors. Then we've got the autonomy of those local citizens' advice. So they are really autonomous. They can choose how they deliver advice, and they are best placed to do that, in my opinion, as well. Then we've got the funding landscape. So funding really influences the size and shape of the services that we provide. And funding is really stretched. And lots of these local citizens' advice are in really precarious positions. And this is at a national, regional, and local level. And then there are many different service models as well. So it's not as if every single one of these citizens' advice is delivering advice in the same way. I hope that that illustrates that this is quite a complex space in which to learn about and then operate. And if you look at this map again, you might think, oh, these local citizens' advice map to population density, which is kind of right, but rather simplistic. And so I try not to generalize. But this isn't about admiring the problem, as a former colleague would say, like, ooh, this is so interesting. We must do some more investigation. But rather acting on what you know and making things better. So I'm going to talk about data at Citizens Advice. The clicker's not up to my pace. This is like a little bit of a playbook, perhaps, talking about data. Maybe this is the most important thing. If you're working with data in an organization and you're not talking about it with everybody, I really suggest that you start doing that. One of the first things I did when I joined Citizen Advice, well, not the first thing, that's like 6 months, that really is moving slowly, sorry. But anyway, there was COVID lockdown, and we needed the best single view of what was happening across our service that we could manage at short notice, and it was a big Google sheet. And shout out to my colleague Tom McInnes, formerly the Chief Analyst, now the Director of Policy. I really appreciate working with Tom. At that point in time, we were like bouncing ideas off each other, learning about the service, pushing what we know, and that was great and really helpful for accelerating that understanding from my point of view. And in addition to this data product, we had a regular open session, open to all, where we talked about the latest trends and we iterated the product as well. Oh. I mean, that's funny. For the first time in my life, I was looking at charts for work that were interesting. Maybe you don't have that privilege. I'm going to show you some charts. So this is the first one. I acknowledge these are not accessible charts. These are internal charts, which should also be accessible, but apologies for that. First up, there is a line. This is channel mix. And we've got there, top, left, that's face-to-face advice, the predominant model before COVID lockdown happened. And then it just disappears, obviously, because everything is locked down. And then it comes back. This big screen is cool. Gradually, yeah? But it doesn't get to the same place that it was at before because the service has fundamentally changed. And there are other shifts in here that you can pick out too. It's a wonderful illustration of a system responding to a shock. This is about debt advice, again, related to the pandemic. And you can see we got 3 different types of the most popular debt advice. Before the pandemic, council tax arrears was highest, and credit card and store card debts were high, and fuel debts were low. But then, during that lockdown, the credit and store card debts changed. Coming out of lockdown, with the energy crisis, those fuel debts increased. So the nature of advice we were providing, but also the conditions in society were really changing. It's a great illustration of that. Sometimes these charts are really sobering as well. So for a long time, there was a high prevalence of this other code. So one of the main mechanisms for understanding these things is advisors' code issues, yeah? And upon further investigation, there was this huge unrecognized volume of advice about charitable support and food banks. And over the years after that code was introduced, and you can see seasonal patterns here as well, which is really kind of vital in terms of prediction and how you might respond, that food bank usage increased and increased. Our demographics data is very interesting. One of the most fundamental things, I think, and again, I didn't appreciate this day one, but top right there, over 60% of Citizens Advice clients are disabled or have a long-term health condition. You think about how that shapes advice needs, that's really important, and also speaks to, that speaks to the needs of that demographic as well. And then at the bottom there, we've got the age profiles, the line at the bottom that's gradually raising. That's the increase in advice provided to people under 25, which is, it's still like in a minority, but substantially greater than it was. And lots of other shifts in there as well. This one is very important. We do a survey after providing advice of clients about their experience of the service, and this shows that there is a significant discrepancy in experience for clients of colour, particularly in terms of accessing our service, the question at the top there. And to that end, one of our strategic missions is to close the access gap. And this is as a response to that data, something that has been known for a while. We're going to end the disparities in access and experience for marginalised people. The other missions are taking early action. That's mission 3. Oh, damn it. Yes, that's mission 3, which is about early intervention in society so advice needs aren't so acute, and also providing advice fit for the future. I could do 40 minutes on charts, but I'll stop there. Another example of talking about data is Start the Week with Data, an initiative I came up with. This is data stories from across the whole organization, not from the specialists. Data doesn't just have to be a specialist endeavor, and curating that and encouraging people to talk about the data that they were working with was great. I ran it for 3 years. We did 92 sessions. We had a rolling log open to all, and that includes videos, transcripts, links to presentations and dashboards. I still refer back to it today. Here's an example of my colleague Rosa's work. I mentioned those funded services. So we've got 4 different funded services providing web chats here. And the chart is illustrating how, for any given service, the length of text that a client receives is going to be longer than another one, with that debt service at the end, a large amount of text to work through. And that's worth thinking about if you're going to optimize for users who are suited to chat. I think being curious in this space, hopefully I'm illustrating some curiosity individually and in general, is essential. And pushing back the boundaries of what we know. Pushing the boundaries of your evidence base leads back to data improvement. And once again, it's not the data, it's the people that work with it. Sorry. Oh, sorry, this is my... I honestly believe this is the most important thing from my point of view. This is the transformational thing. This might not be the only thing that is causing drag in your organization, but in terms of data work, turning tacit knowledge or your internal structures into something that can be readily understood outside of your organization and by other people, that is the work to do. If you've experienced the one person who is the only person who knows how the thing works, that's a pattern to break. Working in pairs, working on documentation that isn't just for yourself, but is actually tested by other people. This is how we approach it. Abstracting away from production databases and thinking about how could this data actually be intelligible to another person, and making that data work by sharing it externally as well. For me, this is very important. Second in the playbook, it gets shorter from here, building the team. Here's the team. Great team. Rory and Josh are in the audience. I've had the privilege to recruit a lot of these people. It took a while because when I started, I had limited opportunities to recruit. And then even better, it got to a point where I could step away from recruitment and we're still bringing in great people. And it was important to build a diverse team, which is essential for the, well, essential full stop, particularly important to my mind in data work and also given our organization and its mission. And we will be hiring, no vacancies right now, but please look out. I'd also like to shout out to former colleagues Pete Watson and Suzanne Fox, recently left Citizens of Ice, but were extremely helpful to me. In this building the team, we came up with some away days, a practice that was really great, like have a day away from the day job, work on a challenge, not necessarily related to work collaboratively, get together, but also make it equally good for people in person, and the iterative development of that was great. And also I think for the volunteers who work on, for those people who volunteer to curate the day, that's probably the best learning in and of itself. I'd like to blog about this in particular. I think it would be excellent. And thinking about the away day and thinking about change takes time. There's often this question about how do you know that you've made a difference? And on the last away day, my colleague Doug, who's been at Citizens of Ice a fair amount longer than I have, said we couldn't have done these things 5 years ago. These things being, we were practicing prompt engineering with a large language model over unstructured transcripts in order to identify, for example, indicators of financial vulnerability. Extremely relevant work. Sorry, that's 20 minutes, so no, I'm slightly behind. Thanks, Doug. That meant a lot. Third, evolving the infrastructure through solving real problems, through saving time, through delivering new insight. And maybe you'll start by making better spreadsheets up to a point. And apologies to Rory and Josh here. And people are going to say we need a CRM. And on the one hand, yes, you do. But on the other hand, if you replicate your, I don't know, tacit structures in a CRM, you're just going to perpetuate your problems. And we believe that practice and patterns are more important than technology choices. Fourth, the questions bank, a low barrier to entryway to commission work from the team by asking analytical questions. And again, that leads to data improvement. And then that data improvement piece, when you start to reach the edges of your evidence base in terms of what it can tell you, you need to do something different. And that's where we're at now. And this means that we are working with unstructured data from transcripts, and we need to build the capability to be able to work with this. And it also makes the case for new technologies and improved tooling, very relevant to us. If you're in a position where there isn't a clear case for making your tools better because what you've been working with for the last X years actually is fine, it's difficult to justify. But for us, this new opportunity really makes that case. And that connects nicely to our work on AI. But first, the personal opinions of the private individual Dan Barrett. Oh, I've got to keep my glasses on. Sorry, I need some water. I appreciate that the private individual Dan Barrett wasn't asked to speak. So I apologize for crashing this stage. Please don't call security. When I was asked to do this talk, I thought I would have the hottest takes imaginable. But as a former civil servant, I'm not very good at having opinions in public. I was going to have opinions on art. I was going to be like, AI art is bad. And then I went to see a modern dance piece at Sadler's Wells East. Not something I do very often, but a fantastic experience. And this included live motion capture and generative AI, and the shifting nature of that technology, which everybody will have seen, something like struggling to find a form and not quite being able to fix on it. That was so complementary to the piece, and I was like, maybe AI in art is fine. Music, I probably draw the line at AI music. The music industry doesn't need any more problems. If I wanted to hear Enter Sandman in a Motown style, I would want Metallica to play it themselves, because that would be hilarious and less creepy. There was a time when I was very interested in generative AI. It was the 5th of June, 2022, when I went to this new website and asked it to show me images of football manager and pundit Alan Pardew eating a kebab. Here you go. I also asked it to show me images of German goalkeeping legend Oliver Kahn eating gherkins. And finally, Paolo Maldini eating a burrito. I should have asked it to show me Paolo Maldini eating a panini, because that would have rhymed, and I regret that. But there's also something, well, first of all, the aesthetic is cool still, because it looks like something struggling to be born that probably shouldn't, yeah? And there's something in the probabilistic nature of the technology as well. Paolo Maldini is a footballer, so it's right that most likely he would appear in football kit, and famously only ever played for AC Milan. And every image on that every image on that grid is the AC Milan kit. But life comes at you fast, and I'm sorry, there's a handbrake turn in tone here, because at the weekend I see this headline, which is a lot. And I say change takes time, and yes, but also no, because the distance between the 5th of June 2022 and now is not very far. And there's this thing about the ability to hold all of these conflicting things in your head at once, and how to navigate them. So I'm worried about climate change and theft and labor exploitation and misinformation, and at the same time I recognize that there are significant opportunities from AI, and at the same time I have this technology constantly aggressively being inserted into my life every day. And where I land from a personal point of view is just I really value regular practice and don't want to outsource things like writing somewhere else. But I don't begrudge anybody else's use of AI necessarily, but I would like to be in a position where we're having that conversation. And do I take some of this into my job? Yes, I do. And I think that makes me better at my job. It would be different leading AI at Citizens Advice if I had like a completely unquestioning booster attitude. Oh, I've turned it off. I also recognize there's a lot of privilege in saying this. So my job is not under immediate threat of automation. I'm not under routine time pressure. I'm not bidding for funding from a funder that is mandating the use of AI tools. I don't have specific targets to meet on a daily basis. And that connects nicely to telling you about AI at Citizens Advice. Excuse me. Oh. So understanding context is a superpower again. But this bit has been so difficult and it's needed to happen comparatively faster. I credit my colleague Siobhan Durkin and my colleague Rachel in helping me with this. Siobhan, expert AI consultant, and Rachel as product lead, really helping us navigate our way through and work out what our position should be. These conditions I mentioned earlier in terms of complexity, they play out in the AI, and I mean generative AI space as well. But in particular, the autonomy of local citizens' advice and that funding landscape. A funder might be mandating you are going to use an AI solution. Funding is scarce. And with that autonomy, there's a lot of different attitude across here. Some of these local citizens' advice are extremely pro the use of AI. Some are very adept in the use of AI. Some don't know anything about it. Some are very skeptical. And that spectrum of attitude plays out in our national organisation as well. But I root myself in what does this mean for our service, yeah? And there are opportunities. AI can bring us closer to the advice given, particularly in terms of, so we apply quality standards to AI, and imagine that those quality standards, which are largely a human process at the moment, could be applied at scale as a rule set to continuously improve the quality of advice and also have other benefits like helping advisors to be trained. And then also there is undoubtedly, given what I described about the data collection piece earlier, a lot of time to be saved and making advisors' work more meaningful. I want to shout out Citizens Advice Stockport, Oldham, Rochdale and Trafford. This is one of the independent local citizen advice, and they have an innovation team creating products from a deep understanding of our service and a deep understanding of client and advisor needs. And their work is fantastic. Their work in the open, I thoroughly suggest that you check it out. And shout out to Stuart Pearson, Curtis Massey and the team there as well. And I'll reference some of SORT's work in this next bit. We kind of aligned on, there are 6 use cases for AI in our service, and again, rooting in what does it mean for our service. There's an advisor support chatbot. SORT's Caddy is the example here. An advisor will ask through a chat interface a question relating to a client's advice needs, and responses will be returned by the AI chatbot based on trusted sources of our advice and some other advice, and also subject to multiple safety checks, and then also subject to advisor approval, so there's a human in the loop. I mentioned this case recording, and second use case is the case note summarization and automation of that workload. Letter writing and form filling. A huge amount of this advice work is involved in filling out forms, like personal independence payment forms, for example. Imagine there's time to be saved there. Client triage, I mentioned some of the work that the team were investigating. What if we could get people to the place that best suited their needs on each channel faster than we otherwise could? Language translation, going back to that, going back to the access point, that should be possible if we can make it safe, and a public-facing interface perhaps, yeah? And these are presented in order of risk, and that public-facing interface is the riskiest of the lot. But it's about rebalancing demand, because we know, to what I said about demand being too high to meet, there are clients in the telephone queue who should be able to self-serve digitally, and that reduces capacity for those who can only call on the telephone. So this could be transformative. And it's not just about building tools either. We've found that providing training, guidance, and policy is just as valuable as building tools ourselves. And across that network that I've shown on the map, people are building and implementing their own tools. But how can we work to make that safe? And on the training point, we did a collaboration with the Open University, led by Dr. Francine Ryan, to create free training materials for the advice and legal sectors, which has been very successful in upskilling people and building that level of understanding. Talk about data, talk about AI. So we had an AI working group with national colleagues to kind of develop our understanding and our understanding of that position. What does this mean for our service? And also we have an AI community of practice across our national organisation and our network, hundreds of people on a video call every month, hearing about the latest developments. And again, it's not the expert voices necessarily, but it enfranchises everybody, and that's led by my colleague Rachel and also Charlie Young from Citizen Advice, Arran and Chichester. That co-leadership works really well. Putting strategy into action. What's the role of the Citizens Advice National Organisation? What feels right? What can we do that nobody else can? And this is about this very abstract image, which I won't explain, I'm sorry. But broadly, how do we implement those feedback loops so that we can harness those advice interactions at scale in the service of clients and advisors so that we can continuously improve? And also do things like we can provide these tools to the network at the lowest cost point. But then there's also risk and threat in here, and the risk is considerable. And we consciously take on that risk because others won't. And to that end, develop the responsible AI framework, largely Siobhan's work, as a repeatable approach developed by experts. And we put these principles into practice in how we develop our tools, but also baked it into our member standards, so the agreement that all of the local citizen advice have to sign up to, so that, once again, that enables their safe innovation. And mitigating bias and risk of harm in our advice provision is essential. And 95% model accuracy does not equal care for every person. In the framework, techniques like consequence scanning, evaluation of performance, fairness evaluation, and then in production, appropriateness, safety check, informed review, making sure humans are involved, and constant monitoring. And this work is different, and it requires specific expertise to build. A lower technical barrier to entry, many opportunities for reuse, a constant effort on evaluation, which is new and enfranchises data people, and a need to adapt to external changes quickly. Last bit is about misinformation. Am I okay, Sean? Yeah? Okay. Not, I mean in general, I mean in this talk right now. For real? Okay, cool. Oh, that's nice. That was, okay. I'll have a sip of what, 4 minutes? Yeah. The external impact of AI on advice. This is enormous. And I feel a bit almost dim. Why wasn't I doing this 18 months ago? But hey, I'm busy. We're operating in a new world. Hasn't been long since the last energy crisis. Citizen Advice worked in that energy crisis, a very prominent voice, but it's a completely different information landscape now. But we need to build the evidence base. I hear anecdotal evidence about people coming to Citizen Advice in a worse position because they've been recommended to take a particular course of action, or they have trusted an AI-generated source. But to that point about our evidence base, how important it is, and how it's important to be able to speak to this potential issue at scale with neutrality. We only have weak signals at the moment, so one of our main focuses over the next 6 to 9 months is going to be how can we establish that evidence base. With some questions to answer like, are clients increasingly using generative AI for their advices? I think that's a yes. Is it increasing client harm? That's tougher. You've got to define harm. That's going to be an interesting prospect. Is it accelerating quickly? I'm pretty sure yes, but amongst which demographics? Is it eroding trust in our brand? That's a very neat problem to, again, this is one of the anecdotal pieces, because people trust the AI interface more than a person. Is that going to be a problem that, like, the credibility of what they've been presented with resonates with them more than what an advisor would tell them? How is that happening? Is that going to get worse, and how could we tackle that? And which client demographics are affected? Because these might be quite unusual, yeah? AI use in the under 35s, but maybe not the under 25s, and the relative susceptibility to misinformation, I would say. So working to improve the information landscape is a great example of how we can ensure safe advice. And it's ambitious, but it's an exciting new area. It's aligned well with our strategy, and it gives me the opportunity to finish on a slide from maybe 8 years ago. If somebody could take a picture for the socials, that would be great. Thanks very much. I know it's been a whistle-stop tour. If people want to talk more about it, please contact that email address and say, Dan said this thing at the conference. Please, can we talk about it some more? Thanks very much.